Okay, thanks everybody for joining us today. This week is Parshah Balak, and it's split. Last week was Chukas, this week is Balak. Sometimes they're together, sometimes they're separate. This year they're separate, so we have a chance to speak about Balak a little more. On page 856 in the Hebrew, 857 in the English. So Parshas Balak is another really long episode, almost till the end of the Parsha, of where just sort of a very quick overview, and I want to hopefully touch upon a few items and bring out a tremendous idea. And if we have time, we'll talk about a few other things. Just very quickly, it's as it starts off in the beginning that Vayar Balak ben Tzipar, Balak, the son of Tzipar, right? Melech, the king of Moab, right? He saw what the Jewish people did, right, to the Amori and to Og, and the last week's parsha, right? And he got all scared, and so he hired Bilam, right? Bilam, who was a prophet, a prophet at the time, a non-Jewish prophet. It's an interesting discussion, but why was there a non-Jewish prophet? And Rashi goes into it a little bit, and it's a very interesting discussion, right? That the nations of the world shouldn't say it, oh, if we had a prophet, we would have been also like the Jewish people, right? But it's a very interesting discussion. It's not for today, but something to think about. But whatever it is, he was a prophet, and part of his prophecy also, he had the power of words. He was able to curse or bless, and his words had that power that they were listened to. Hashem gave him that koach, right? It wasn't something by itself, but Hashem gave him that koach, that strength, that ability. So he hired him. He sent messengers. In the beginning, Bilam said, "Oh, Hashem said really not to go." Right? We'll talk about that in a minute. Right? If you turn the page, 858. So Vayomer Lakim El Bilam, verse 12. Lo selach imam, you should not go with them, right? Because the nation is blessed. So what did Bilam say the next morning? Page 13. Vayakim Bilam babok vayomer el sari balak l'chuel, go back to your land. Me'ein Hashem l'tihelech imachem. God does not want me to go with you, right? You guys are not worthy enough to be the messengers. I should go with you, which we'll talk about. We'll expand on this a little bit. We're just going to point a few different places of this idea where Bilam heard what he wanted to hear, right? Hashem told him, "Lo selach imahem, don't go with them," right? So bless you. So Bilam didn't say, "Oh, Hashem said not to go with them." He didn't say that he shouldn't go and curse the Jewish people, but lo selach imahem, don't go with them, right? But others he should be able to go with, right? Now, why didn't Hashem just say lo selach, don't go? Because that's part of the free will, part of his nisayon, part of his struggle of having wiggle room to make up what he thinks it was to do what he wants to do and not Hashem's will. Right? And we'll expand on this a little bit soon. So then the next group of people come, right? And he asks Hashem again, and Hashem says you should go, but whatever I say to you, right, will be put into your words, right? I'm just warning you. I'm in control, right? You want to go, and you should go, but I'm in control. Then there's the whole story of the angel on the way, right? And Bilam's donkey, right, goes off, and then finally he's between two walls and he scrapes his foot. Bilam screams at him. The donkey opens up his mouth. Probably that's where Shrek comes from, right? Where the donkey in Shrek talks, right? Right? He says, I've been serving you for so long, right? Why are you doing this? And then Hashem opens up Bilam's eyes and he sees the angel. He says, oh, I sinned. No, and now Hashem says you have to go. All right, we'll expand on that in a minute. Just very quickly do a quick overview. So then Bilam goes, and from page 862, basically till the end, Balak makes different places where he brings different sacrifices, right? And Bilam tries to curse the Jewish people, and every time blessings come out of his mouth instead of curses. And Balak says, "What are you doing to me? I asked you to curse." He said, "Well, I told you whatever Hashem tells me, I have to do." Right? And that really takes us almost to the end. Then, so Balak says, okay, it's enough, stop, right? I don't need you blessing the Jewish people anymore, right? So Bilam goes on his way, but right before Bilam leaves, he gives him an idea. He says, listen, right, the curses didn't work. but you should get the Jewish people to do an avera, to do idol worshiping and adultery, right? Or so he sends out the Benos Moab, right, out, and they have relations with some of the Jewish people, and they go ahead and they also serve Baal Pa'ar, right? That's a famous Baal Pa'ar, right? And that really comes to the end of the parsha, where it speaks about that even one of the nasis of the Jewish people, right, Cosby, right, he went ahead and he took a lady, right, and then that's where it ends up with Pinchas saying, how could this happen, right? And Pinchas goes ahead and he took a spear and he stuck the spear in between Cosby and what's it called, and the girl and the lady, and the girl was not just any girl; she was a princess. She was a Moab princess, right? And he kills all of them together, and then it says that the plague stopped, right? There was a plague, and the plague stopped when he did that. Very interesting component. If we have time, maybe we'll talk about that. We'll probably talk about that next week a little bit when we talk about Pinchas. Right, but that's sort of a quick overview of this week's parsha. So I wanna touch upon a few unbelievable ideas in this week's parsha, and to really set a stage of our daily lives. Right? There's a lot of people ask Parshas Balak. Right? It seems to be like a very abstract parsha. Right? If you think about it. Actually, someone brought this to my attention this year. I never really thought about it in this component. People always speak about it. It seems a bit abstract. It's not really talking about the Jewish people. It talking about Balak and Bilam and the whole story and the blessings and all that, of course, about the Jewish people. Someone brought it to my attention this year in just a very strong way, right? That really it's sort of like a behind the scenes of what's going on, right, about the Jewish people. The majority of the parsha, yes, the last little bit, right, talks about the Jewish people doing the Avera, and then Pinchas going ahead and killing them, right, being a kanoi, being a zealot for Hashem. And there is a concept of a true zealot, right? Zealot is a good thing when it's done properly. But that's for next week's parsha, right? But really, it's something to reflect on and to think about, right? That this week's parsha really is a very abstract kind of parsha. It's very abstract, where most of the parsha is speaking about something that is happening to the Jewish people from behind the scenes, and not necessarily the Jewish people even knew yet that this was happening. Right? They were in the valley, and Balak and Bilam were in their place. They had spies. They knew what was going on, not necessarily, and it's just. Something to reflect on, and I was talking to this friend. He lives here, right? And he asked me on this by Mincha on Shabbos, because starting the parsha. And as I was thinking about it, I think there's a tremendous lesson to learn from this. And this was the thought that was developing in my head. And commentaries speak about this, as I mentioned, in other ways, but sort of just bring it out in this very strong way. Is that this is really a lesson, right, to our daily lives. Our daily lives are lives of, we have no clue what is happening to the Jewish people. Yeah, thank God now we have we have intelligence, and we have this and we have that. But, even with all the intelligence, right, how many times they had plans and it got destroyed by themselves, or we never even heard about it, or we only heard about it later, and it didn't really work out the way they thought it would work out. There's plenty of stories like that where, there's. I remember a few years ago there was a story where the truck that they bought, the battery died and they couldn't get out, and then the explosion happened too early. There's all these different stories, and they only found out later, right? And we really brings to mind that. We say in Hallel, how it's in King David says in Psalms, Haluka kol gayim, all the nations in the world are going to praise you. Right? And the commentaries ask, well, what does it mean that the nations of the world are going to praise you? We are the ones that are praising Hashem. Why would they praise Hashem? Right? And the commentaries explain that the nations of the world praise Haluka kol gayim, all the nations are going to praise you because They know how many times they wanted to hurt us. They know how many plans they might have had, right? And it never came to fruition, which we don't even know. So that the end of the days, they're going to come and they're going to praise Hashem in a way that we cannot praise Hashem, right? Because of how many times, right? There was something that should have happened, or they tried even on a smaller scale or a community or whatever it is, and Hashem didn't let it happen. Right, and that I think is a lesson from something that we could reflect on from this week's parsha, right? And it's always important to reflect on this, but how much more so with everything that's going on these past few years, right? The last few months, the last few weeks, right? And realize that Hashem, Hashem is always watching over us, right? And this week's parsha is a parsha of sort of an abstract, sort of from a distance, right? It's from a different viewpoint of where we all things that are happening to the Jewish people. Balak making a plan and getting Bilam, right, and bringing him and bringing all these sacrifices and different mountaintops and different things, and Bilam blessing the Jewish people instead of being able to curse the Jewish people, and all these plans that were happening and they didn't come to fruition, and on the contrary, turned out good for the Jewish people, right? And not necessarily the Jewish people even knew that this was happening. We find a similar idea in last week's parsha, right? In the middle of last week's parsha, when we have it says that Az Yashir, then they sang a song to Hashem, right? And it refers to, I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but it refers to, Rashi says it refers to, because they saw the blood coming in from the stream, and they wondered where is this blood coming from. And what happened is that the nation said, okay, there was a path that the Jewish people had to walk through where there was caves on one side and caves on the other side, but there was boulders on either side of the cave. And the way they were is that they were sort of opposite from each other. And they all stood, they were in the caves, and when the Jewish people were going to come through this path, they were going to ambush the Jewish people and throw stones and spears and whatever, right, on the Jewish people and aim to kill them. So before the Jewish people got there, Hashem made a miracle, and these mountains merged together, and the boulders on one side went into the caves of the other one, and the boulders on the other one went into the caves of the other one and squashed them, right? And the Jewish people only found out about the miracle afterwards when they saw that there was blood coming down in the stream, right, from the mountain, and they wanted to know what it was, and then they found out about this. So it's another example, right, of where we always have to remember that Hashem is constantly watching over us, Hashem is constantly taking care of us, right? And I think that's a lesson that we can learn from about how this parsha, just the whole direction of the parsha, again, is always what to learn from everything. There's a reason why this parsha is written in a way, right, where it's more from a distance, from a different perspective, and I think that's one of the lessons that we can learn from this week's parsha, even before we get into the words of the parsha. Just something to reflect on and to think about. Okay, let's now I want to talk about Balak. First Balak and then Bilam. Right? It says Vayar Balak saw, right? Everything that the Jewish people did for the Mar. We're back on page 856. Right? So Rashi says, right, what does he see? Right? The two kingdoms, right, that they were relied on, Og and Sichon, right? These two mighty, in the end of last week's parsha, these two mighty nations that sort of they paid, this concept of protection money, right, is not a new thing, right? And nowadays, it's the mafia, right? Or back in the day, it was the mafia. Right? Back then, it was nations, right? Sichon and Og were paid protection money, right? That because the way to get to Ammon and Moab was through them, right? So they were paid protection money. Right? And these two mighty nations just crumbled underneath the Jewish people. So that's what he saw. So he realized that he can't go out to fight with them. So he said, I'm going to try to fight them in a way of their way. Right? And that's why he hired Bilam. Right? And when I read this, it always makes me think. Right? And I said, just I don't maybe I've seen this somewhere sometime, but I don't know. It's just something that always makes me think. Balak saw something, and he could have had a completely different reaction, right? If I would have seen that, what I would have said, okay, we know it was clear. Moshe kept on saying, we don't want to fight with you. Right? Our fight's not with you. Our fight, we need Eretz Yisrael. Our fight's not with Ivar Yarden. Any nation that was on the side of the Yarden, they said, let's just pass through our nation. Og and Sichon. Right? So if I was Balak, I would say, okay, send out messengers to Moshe and say, hey, let's do a peace treaty. It could go right through my land. Right? There's no problem. Right? Go through it and then just go straight to Eretz Yisrael, and we won't give you any troubles. Right? That's what I would think that he would see. If you see a mighty nation, you see Hashem running, you see spirituality, you see something that defies the laws of nature, right? So don't try to fight them. Okay, oh no, so I'm going to find another way how to fight them, right? So it's just something that we do also. Believe it or not, we do this on our own level, right? And we're going to talk about this in a minute from Bilam's perspective. But when you see something, we paint it with our own desires, our own needs, our own viewpoints, our own stigma that we might have had from before, or our own beliefs. Right? He was just always doctrine that the Jewish people are going to wipe them out, and you have to fight the Jewish people. Since it came out of Mitzrayim and Amalek fought the Jewish people in the first place, it was sort of ingrained that the Jewish people are going to come and they're going to ruin them or whatever it is. So now that he saw that fighting them is not going to work, so I have to find another way to fight them through Bilam, right? But he'd never even dawned on his mind that when he saw that fighting them wasn't going to work, and these two mighty nations crumbled underneath them, to say, okay, whoa, let's change our direction. Maybe let's become Noahides and say, okay, guys, we're good, believe in one Hashem, right? And we'll accept the 7 mitzvahs b'nei Noach, and you just go through our land and go to Eretz Yisrael. It never even dawned on him to do that, right? And that's, I think, a tremendous lesson in our daily lives to reflect on and to think about how, and I'm talking to myself 100%, how we do this also. We do this on a much smaller level, of course, but we do it with ourselves also. We see something and we don't necessarily see the positive on something. We don't see, okay, so maybe I have to change. Right? Maybe this is the right way. The rabbi, it's a famous thing. The rabbi gives a sermon, and the guy comes up to the rabbi. He says, "I'm so glad that Chaim was here at the sermon that he could hear that." Right? No. Take it in yourself. Right? Reflect on it yourself. Think about, how is this sermon going to affect me? How am I supposed to change from this? Right? Or whatever it is. Or you see something going on in Israel. So what are we supposed to do about that? We're supposed to enhance our Torah learning, enhance our charity, enhance our relationship with Hashem. Right? Be it if it's whatever level you're holding, to notch it up, not with okay, well, we have to find another one. Of course, we have to do our effort, and they're doing that plenty. Right? But there's plenty of things to reflect and to say. I gotta have the right perspective and say, okay, so maybe I have to completely change my perspective. Maybe it's not in the Torah way, right? And I always, when I see this, I was like, how stupid are you? Sorry, right? Hello, just let the Jewish people go through. Don't find another way to fight them. So that's one thing that we could learn. Along the same lines, we find this in Bilam also, and I touched upon this very quickly. And this is something that I think is something that we do much more often, right? And we do much more often, and that is, right, that we first spoke about. If you turn the page to 585, say 858. Sorry, I just did that completely backwards. 585. It's really 858, right? But as we said, right, that verse 12, Bilam says, Hashem says to Bilam, don't go. Right, but he says, Lo selechim, do not go with them. And then the next verse, Bilam tells them, says, Hashem said, Lo selechit imchem, do not go with you. Right, but greater people, better messengers, I could go with. Right, and that's why Balak sent next a higher level of a delegation. Right, there wasn't just the staff but it was actually the ministers that went, right? There was actually the different ministers that came themselves, a higher level staff and some more gold and things like that. And then he said, okay, wait, I still have to ask Hashem. And then Hashem said, okay, you didn't hear my thing, so you should go. Right? So number one that we learn from here, right, is again this thing that we hear what we want to hear, right? I know we all tell this to our kids sometimes also, right? You hear what you want to hear, or sometimes you tell it to your spouse, sometimes you tell it to your coworkers, right? We hear what we want to hear. And Balak heard that Hashem was saying, oh, they're not good enough for you. You have to get a better delegation, right? Where Hashem was telling him not to go. Right. So number one, what was the root of this? Is because Bilam was an egotistic maniac. Right. That's number one. He was haughty. He was egotistic. He revolved around himself, and therefore he thought that just means they weren't respectful enough for him. He needed someone greater. But be it if it comes from ego, if it comes from because I want something, a desire, or something like that, right? I've had it many times when I'm speaking to someone, right? And I tell them something, and they say, "Well, but how about like this? But did you mean this, or did you mean that?" And like you could see that they're trying to not get the answer that I'm giving them, right? Because whatever it may be, if it's something that became not kosher, and unfortunately, you have to either throw it out. It depends on the material, or if it's where they could go somewhere, or whatever it may be. A million different things it could be, right? And sometimes you could feel it, because they don't want that answer, right? So. And I do it myself too. We all do it to a certain degree, right? But that's a lesson that we have to learn to stop and say, no, we really have to listen. We have to internalize what we're hearing and say, so this means to say that my desire or my ego or my thought of what this should be is not really right. And we can't do it that way, right? You got to do it in a different way, right? So that's number one. That's another lesson from that we could learn. Moving along, right, along this lines, but a little slightly different. And moving along, all right. So then Hashem tells him, okay, so you should go, right? You could go. He didn't say you should go. He said you could go. Verse 20, he says. If they came to call for you, right, you could go with them. But I'm just warning you, what I tell you, right, what I put in your mouth, that's what you're going to say. If you feel that they're coming to call, so then you could go with them. So Bilam understood that as, again, the same thing, that he should go with them. Hashem was just giving him an opening, now that it's a second time, right? So I'm just warning you, and he gave him a warning, right? It's going to be what I say, not what you think you want to say, but it's going to be what I say. So he goes. So he goes with him, right? So the next verse is Vayicharaf Elokim, right? God gets angry because he goes with him. Vayisatze Malach Hashem B'derech. We're on page 860. The next verse. Right, verse 22, right? Malach Hashem B'derech, he sends an angel in the road, l'satin lo, right, to obstruct him, really to impede him, to sort of stop him, right? And that's where we start getting with the story with the donkey, which we're going to get to in a minute. But before that, so the commentaries want to know, why did Hashem get angry? Right? Hashem just told him he could go. Right? Why did Hashem get angry? And the answer is because it's a lot, as we were saying, Hashem didn't tell him, hey, go with them. Hashem said, if you feel that they're coming to call you, and this is what you want to do, so I'm giving you permission to go. Right? But I'm not telling you to go. I already told you before not to go. You misunderstood my words, right? But that, again, this is part of, and this is very important, right? Just because something seems to be allowed or sort of, oh, look, this is happening to me, I'm okay, it must be okay. No, because that's part of our nisayon, that's part of our challenge that God gives us. Right? Why did Hashem not say clearly, and this is what we touched upon when we were giving the recap of the parsha, why did Hashem just say, lo seilech, do not go? Right? Do not go to Balak at all. Right? Why didn't he say that? Why did he say, lo seilechim bahem, don't go with them? Right? Because there has to be free will. Bilam has to have a choice, right? And if it was, since Bilam was a level of a nevuah, a level of prophecy, he was talking to God, if Hashem would have told him straight out not to go, in the most clearest way where there's no level of interpretation, right, for Bilam to make, right, then Bilam would not be able to go. Even though he was a Russian, he was an evil man, but at the end of the day, he did have a conversation with Hashem. right? And he knew what Hashem told him. So Hashem had to give him an opening for his free will. That's part of the greatest thing in the world. We all have free will. And again, at the end, he said, okay, if you feel that this is what you want to do, so then go with them. But I'm not endorsing this. But Yicharaf Hashem, God got upset because Bilam, right, did not hear the warning that Hashem gave him. Bilam interpreted the way he wanted interpreted. That's why Hashem got upset, right? And that's really a lesson for all of us, that when we interpret how Hashem, how we think it should be, right, or we don't hear it, Hashem gets sad. Hashem gets upset, right? Right, but back to what we have to remember is that just because something, Rabbi, it must be okay because look, if Hashem didn't want me to do this, and then He wouldn't give me the opportunity to go ahead and to go into McDonald's, or He won't give me the opportunity to invest in a winery that's not kosher, right? A little own a winery that's not kosher because you're not allowed to have enough from that, right? Or whatever it is. You wouldn't give me the opportunity. No. He gives us the opportunity because that's part of our free will, right? Just because that's being allowed doesn't mean to say that's what Hashem wants. That's part of our free will. And now it's up to us to make the decision and based off the knowledge and ask our rabbis what is the right thing to do and what's not the right thing to do. So that's number two. That's level number two. Now, I want to show you something, guys. It's something so powerful. Every time I read this, it's unbelievable. Right? It says that God sent a malach, an angel. Right? So Rashi says, right, this angel is. If you look at Rashi, l'shatin lo, if you don't have to look at it inside, but Rashi says, right, the second line in Rashi on the right column, right, malach so rachamim haya. It was an angel of mercy. This angel is an angel of mercy, right? And he wanted to stop him from sinning, right? And this is unbelievable. This is it's to blow our minds and give us a new set of glasses on what's happening in our lives, right? What happened? This angel, right, got in the way, right, and he kept on making the donkey move out of the way, and Bilam, from Bilam's perspective, it just looks like the donkey was not behaving. The car, the transmission goes, right. Okay, yeah, we shouldn't talk about that. Right, but or a flat tire, or this or that, and then so there's a traffic jam, and you can't. The road's closed on your street, so you can't get off your street, right? So the angel kept on blocking Bilam, right, from going, and from Bilam's perspective was like, what's going on over here? This is terrible. This is. But really, it was an angel of rachamim. It was an angel of mercy because the Hashem sent an angel of mercy to try to stop Bilam from doing the wrong thing again. He didn't hear it when Hashem told him the first time. He misinterpreted. The second time Hashem told him, okay, you can go, but I'm not. He didn't hear his tone of voice. He didn't hear from Hashem that he didn't really want him to go. And so now Hashem said, okay, I'm going to make obstacles. Maybe you'll realize, why am I having so many obstacles, right? My donkey always was a good, as Bilam said himself, right? You're always a good donkey. And the donkey said back to Bilam, right? Did I ever stray? Did I ever stray from you? Did I ever give you any issues? Why are you hitting me, right? And so Bilam should have thought about that and say, hey, right? What's going on over here? And then say, okay, so maybe I misinterpret what Hashem says. No. You know what? Sorry, Hashem doesn't really want me to go. It's not that it's with you. He doesn't want me to go. He doesn't really want me to go. But the Malach of Rachamim, it's mind-boggling. It's a new set of glasses onto what things happen to us, right? And it's something to reflect into our daily lives, right? That when we are doing something, right, and I'm talking to myself 100%, right? When we want to go do something or we think we're doing something right, whatever it is, but reflect on it and say, hey, if the car is not starting on Shabbos morning, maybe it's time to stop driving on Shabbos, right? If I'm going to a non-kosher restaurant and I'm having it's very trapped, maybe Hashem is trying to tell you it's time to start changing that. It's time to grow and change a little bit. Right? Each one of us on our own level, of course, right? And we, God forbid, just a reminder, we never judge anybody. We all grow from one level to another level. We're all holding on different levels, right? But on our level, sometimes it's time to reflect and to think about So when these things happening, right, it's rachamim. Hashem is trying to stop us from doing something that might not be the right thing, and we might not have heard it from the rabbi, or from the sermon, or from when we learned it, or we don't really want to hear it from whatever it is, or we know about it, but it's not really resonating with us. Right? Hashem saying, well, let me give you some obstacles, or whatever it may be, from different ways, right? So let's reflect. That's what's going on over here. That's what the malach is. It's a malach of rachamim, a malach of mercy. It's mind-boggling to think about it. Right? The Rashi says it's a malach of rachamim, a malach of mercy. Right? And this is something that really happens in our daily lives, a malach of mercy. And you know, it's really. I believe this is one of the strongest. We're going to bring this out in the most strongest way in a minute, but I think this is really one of the most strongest things that we could reflect on and to sort of change our glasses. Because if we change our glasses, if we look at things in a different way, first of all, we'll be happier people. We'll start learning from situations that happen to us, right? And we might realize that we have to change our ways a little bit, right? And we won't let these things that happen to us make us all upset and to ruin our day, right? On the contrary, it's something to learn from, right? I was talking to, this is someone in Jacksonville a long time ago, from almost the beginning when I was there. Right, we started learning about tzedakah and giving 10% of that. The mitzvah is 10%, and he said, "Really? I thought only Christians believe that." I said, "No, it's a pasuk in the Torah, right? Concept of tithing is they got it from us, right? It's a pasuk in the Torah, right?" But he told me something very interesting. He said that he made a calculation that year, right, of what his tithing, what his 10%, what his tithing would be. And he realized with the amount that he gave, the difference of what he should have given and the amount that he gave was added expenses that he had that year, either air conditioning blowing or car trouble or whatever it was, right? He made a calculation, it's almost the same amount, right? And he said, wow, that's, maybe and what we could look at is maybe Hashem was, number one, we learn that you're decreed, whatever it's decreed on Rosh Hashanah, how much money you're going to have. It doesn't make a difference, right? If you give your tzedakah, if you don't give your tzedakah, not giving your tzedakah, you're not going to have more money, right? You might have other expenses. It's decreed on Rosh Hashanah how much money you're going to have that year, right? It could be based off, how much work you do and how much work you don't do, or it could be just going to win the lottery. That's a different discussion, right? And generally, it's also based off, how much effort you put in and how much work you put. But it could be either way. But it's decreed in how much you're going to have, right? So by you thinking that, well, I can't afford to give 10% because I need whatever, right? It's already decreed how much you're going to have, right? And Hashem will take it out in other ways, chas v'shalom, right? Hopefully it's just car issues or whatever it is, right? So, but the point he was bringing out was that he looked at it as a way saying, wow, okay, maybe Hashem is telling me that I have to start giving more money. But that's what we have to look at our lives. We have to look at our daily lives, right? Things that happen and change our philosophy and change our thing and say, okay, no, this is a lesson from Hashem that Hashem is telling us. It's a malach of rachamim. It's an angel of mercy that's coming out to try to stop him, right? And that's also what's happening to either one of us individually or collectively or as a group or as a community or as a shul or as a nation, whatever it is. Sometimes these are things for us to reflect on, to learn from, right? And we're not talking about chas v'shalom, major catastrophes, and that's another discussion. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about things like things that affect us directly, right? That we have to reflect on that. So that's level number 2 of the story of Balaam. Now the kicker comes, right? We turn the page, right? Then after the third time, right? Where are we? Here we go. On the bottom of the page, 860, the bottom of the page. Right? So Yomer Bilam, so it says that Vataras Samalach Hashem, verse 57. the angel sees again the donkey sees again the angel of Hashem, right? Page 860, verse 27, right? Vatikat stachas Bilam v'yicharav Bilam, right? It's sort of Bilam's foot got it, and Bilam got upset again, and he hit the donkey, right? And again, and this time the donkey stopped. It didn't go anywhere. Before it hurt Bilam's foot, and it did. And this time there's no room for the donkey to go, not even to squeeze through. There's nowhere to go, so the donkey just stopped. Right. So Bilam got all vayicha es asna v'machal. Bilam hit the donkey with his tick. So the next verse is verse 28. So Yiftach Hashem es piasan. Hashem opened up the donkey's mouth. All right, Vatomer leBilam, and it spoke to Bilam. What did I do to you? That he hit me these 3 times. All right, so Vayomer Bilam. So Bilam just talks back to the donkey. Right, he says, because you didn't go, and if I had a sword, I'd kill you right here on the spot. Right. So Vatomer said, the donkey tells back to Bilam, I'm your donkey that you rode for me from the beginning of time. Right, I've been your loyal donkey. Right, and I've never done this to you. Right, did I ever do this to you? Right, so this is like a whole conversation going on, Bilam and the donkey. Right, and what is it, Bilam? Bilam doesn't even think twice. He just sort of follows the flow. If I was Bilam, the donkey starts talking. Hello, whoa, okay. You know what? I didn't recognize it. I didn't see them. I didn't realize that, the walking, the donkey, sort of having donkey trouble, right? And the road getting narrow or whatever it is. And, I didn't recognize that was a but the donkey opening up his mouth. It says that this miracle was created in between the end of the 6th day, in Bein Hashmashos, at the end of the day, right? The Pia Asan, with that miracle happened then, was created then. It was a miracle. It wasn't something that happened all the time. Not like Bilam had a conversation with him all the time, right? Maybe he did, but this was a real conversation, right? But Bilam didn't stop and say, "Hey, whoa, donkey's talking. You're right. Why am I hitting you?" Right? This is, and like he said, I've never, and he speaks it out to him. I've been a loyal donkey, right? I've never given you issues, right? I've never gone off stray. I've not been one of those wild donkeys. I've been with you for 30 years already. I've never gone off to how many years. I'm just saying 30 years, right? And Bilam didn't stop to think and say, "Whoa, 1 second. Okay, so there's something else is going on here, right?" That's not what Bilam said. Bilam said, "If I had a sword, I'd kill you." Right? How far we go with our thoughts, and even when something's splashing us in the face, we looking at it, from a different, from 20,000 feet up in the air and looking at the whole thing, and 3,500 years later. But even when something's in your face, the donkey's talking, the donkey's speaking it out. I've never given you issues before, right? Bilam still doesn't see it. He's still gun-hoed on his way, on his thing. No, this time you're wrong, and whatever it is, and you're giving me issues, and I'm going to kill you, right? And this shows how far we dig ourselves in, right, with what we think is right. We think this is right, and we dig ourselves in, and we don't care if the synagogue falls apart, and we don't care if there's a fight, and we don't care if other people get insulted, or we don't care if our spouses get hurt, and we don't care if our kids are collateral, right? Whatever it is, it doesn't make a difference. We are right, and we're going to do it, and we don't notice anything else. Right? Even if it's nothing to do with anybody else, but ourselves, our own growth. Right? We don't see that there's anything going on except for the way we think is the right way. Be it if it's from our ego, be it from our desires, doesn't make a difference what it's from. Right? And this is something that we have to think about. Then what happens? Let's turn the page. Vayigal Hashem is Eino Bilam. Hashem opens up, uncovers Bilam's eyes, but Yaris Malach Hashem, so he sees the angel of Hashem, right, standing in the way. All right, so Bilam goes and bows down. Now that he sees the angel, right, he bows down, right. And Malach Hashem speaks to him and says, "Why did you hit the donkey these 3 times? Right? I was standing in the way. It was me, you dumbbell. Right? It was me. I was there the whole time." So what happens? Right? So then it says, right? But Tirana Asun, so go to verse 34. But Yom Bilam Malach Hashem, Bilam says to Malachim, Chatasi, I sinned. I didn't know that you were there in front of me. If I would have known, I would have stopped it. I didn't know. Right? Right? So now that I see, okay, I'll return. So now you have to go. Right? Because now, and whatever Hashem, again, whatever Hashem tells you, I'm gonna say, right, and you have to go, with them, right? So the commentaries explain that this is really our life, right? That the Malach Hashem opening up our eyes is really once our neshama leaves our body, right? When our neshama leaves our body, then the Malach Hashem, as we said, that's clear. There's no way interpreting it any other way. It was clear. It's the same way Hashem didn't tell him right away, you cannot go with Balak to Moab and curse the Jewish people. Right? He just says, Lo telech imahem, right? Because if he would have said that, there wouldn't have been any free will. When our neshama leaves our body and we go up to Shemayim, right? It's as if we see everything. Our eyes open up. Vayiftach Hashem opened up. Vayigal Hashem is Eina Bilam. Hashem opened up, revealed to him that everything was from the Malach Hashem. Everything that was happening was merciful. It wasn't the donkey, and it was all trying to change. And that Bilam misunderstood what Hashem said, and everything becomes clear. And Bilam says, Chatasi, I sinned. And Hashem says it's too late. Now you have to go with them, and you're going to be the instrument of the Jewish people being blessed. Right? Now you're going to have to go with them. And really, it's a lesson in life, right? That we all have these different obstacles. We have all these different things. We have sometimes we hear, we know what the Torah says, but we say, no, but this means not this way, but maybe that way is okay, right? Or sometimes sometimes when it's a little more clear, right? But we change it up, right? Or we see something happening to us, we say, no, it's just a coincidence. It's not really supposed to be that way. Or why is this happening so many times? It's just the donkey not behaving, right? It's our car not behaving. It's our society. It's this, it's that, right? We don't look at it to reflect internally. And then even when the donkey opens up a mouth, it seems to be so clear, like, hello, wake up, right? Someone's telling you, you have a rabbi that's talking to you, you have a friend that's explaining it to you, right? Then it's clear. But still, no, we're not, we don't. And then when we come up to Shemayim, and we say, oh, Chatasi, but then it's too late. And then it's too late because we could only change ourselves in this world. We can't change ourselves in the next world, right? And that's something. It's a story with Bilam is a lesson in life, really our life cycle, right? And it's till our eyes open up and until Hashem reveals the Malach, we still have time to change. Hashem keeps on giving us opportunities. It keeps on giving us chances, and again, it's a Malach of Racham and Malach of mercy. Right, so let's all reflect on that. Let's all, Baruch Hashem, we're alive and kicking, right, and for many more years, hopefully. So let's reflect on our lives. Let's see what's going on and say, how could I change my way of looking at things? Let me speak to a rabbi. Let me speak to someone that knows and say, okay, why are these things happening? Or maybe let me rephrase and let me look at things. Or let's not be so stubborn on the things that we felt since we were a child that this is really the right way. Maybe things are a little different, right? Maybe let me grow. Maybe not eat so much. Let me eat a little more kosher. Let me keep a little more Shabbos. Let me go to shul a little more, right? Let me, not be on my high horse about a certain thing, whatever it may be. And hopefully we will, when we open up our eyes, we'll say, Baruch Hashem, we did go in the right way, right? And we did listen to those warnings and not like Bilam that did not. Thank you all for joining us today.